Okay, so in our collection section, we're looking at lists, and now we're looking at a new method on the lists, and this method is going to be the index method. So if we just take out, in fact, I'll just type in names over here and dot, and it's going to be, we've done append, index clear, copy, count, extend. Oh, index has moved up our list. We were going alphabetically through it, but index seems to have moved up the list, probably because I'd looked at it or typed it earlier. But anyway, we are on index now. And if we look at index, just look at what it gives us here. It returns the first index of the value, and actually also raises a value error if the value is not present. So it's basically going to look something up in our collection or our bunch of iterables. It's going to go through and look for our particular iterable. If it exists, it will give us the index value, and if it doesn't exist, it's going to throw us back some kind of error. So we will have a little try of all of this. And one thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to clear all outputs, just because it's nice and clean, and I'm actually going to kernel. Do you want to restart the Jupyter kernel, or variables will be lost? So I'm going to hit yes, and that will clean out all of the variables that are in here. So now it's all nice and clean in our Jupyter variables. We didn't have to clean it out, but it's quite nice for the purpose of the video. And the first thing that I'm going to do is going to take this list of names over here and add it over here, and actually just copy this text as well. So we're going to create a list of strings, and our strings are names in this particular case, and we're actually going to extend that a little bit. So let's just make our list a bit bigger by adding on some more names. Instead of just doing the extend, we're just going to add them in and make it even a tiny bit bigger by adding some more names over here, just like this. And one thing that we can do when we are doing lists is, if our list gets too long and we go over, Python has a limit, like an 80 character limit. In theory, for the Zen of Python, we don't want to make our lines too long, and this second red line over here represents the line getting too long. If we want to avoid that, we can break our lists or our iterables, our collections, into multi-lines, like something like this. And we can also do other things as well at that point in time, just to point it out. We could sort of like make it look like this if we wanted to. You could argue that it might be overkill in terms of look, but some people do this. For the purpose of our course, what we're doing right now, for our example, this is more than sufficient. So we've created a list of strings, and actually also, let's just take this to save ourselves the writing. We can print out our names over here like that, and we'll just comment this out for a second. There we go. We've got our list of names: Alice, Bob, Charlie, Darren, Elsa, Fiona, Gary, and Harry. And we're going to try our names.index method. So let's just try and do that. So names.index, and we'll look something up that exists. So say, for example, let's look up Darren. So we'll type in Darren, and let's hit return, and we get back this number 3. So let's put that into a nice print statement. So something like print, and then quotations, Darren is at index position colon, and then wherever this is. So we'll put all of this in here now. And remember that I've used index position here, and the reason why it is indexes start at 0. So when we do our count to see where we're at, Darren looks like it's at number 4, position number 4, if we're counting from 1. So 1, Alice is at 1, Bob is at 2, Charlie's at 3, Darren's at 4. But actually, if we're talking about indexes, we remember that indexes start at 0, so I keep reminding you of that. So this is index 0, this is index 1, this is index 2, and Darren is at index position 3. So that's exactly what we get there. Darren is at index position number 3. Now, let's do, let's add, one thing that we're going to do is, and again, when we hover over this index, we see that it returns the first index of a value. So let's create a list where we've got a duplication. So for example, we're looking up Darren. Let's extend our list by one extra name, and we know how to extend a list. So add an extra item to names. So we'll just do that. Let's add an extra item to names. So we'll do names dot append. It's one way of doing it, and that's quite convenient. And we'll add Darren to names, and what we will do then is reprint out our names list just to give ourselves a level of confidence that it is working. So Ctrl V and just scroll down below, and there we go. We've now got our names, our new names list. So this was our old names list. We've got our new names list over here, and we see that we've got Darren appearing once over here and Darren appearing once over here. And we'll do the same thing, which is we will look for the index position, and we notice that this that Darren occurs twice, but when we do the index position, we see that Darren is at index position 3. So basically this index method is looking through and still finding just the first occurrence. It doesn't care about any other occurrences that happen afterwards. Now finally, on this note, we look at index here, and it says raises value error if the index is not present. So let's try and look for a name that doesn't exist. Let's look for a name that does not exist. So we do names dot index, and then we'll search for a name that doesn't exist. Let's make a name that begins with Z that definitely doesn't exist. So Zany, if that is a name, and run our piece of code, and we see here already we've got this little X here, we've got this little X here. Even before we scroll down, it's kind of like telling us that something's happened that's not right, and we get this value error, Zany is not in list. So what can we do? We've seen this before. We will try to put this in a try except block because it will be cleaner and more graceful. So we do try except block, which looks like this, and we can take names.zany here, just do an X and paste it in the try except block. We haven't done control flow yet, but we're just going to use this as a side because it's quite convenient. We'll do except exception as E because that's useful to do, and then we will print out something graceful and nice. This name does not exist. And then we could print out, if we wanted to, the error message as well. And this is just a cleaner, tidier way. Rather than throwing an error message and breaking our code, we can now check if the name exists or not in the list like that. There are other ways of doing this, by the way. And what we get here is the name does not exist. Zany is not in list. So that's what we get. And E was the is not in list, basically. So that's pretty much summarizes it. The index method is quite useful. It does find the first occurrence of an item in the iterable, and it also throws back a value error or an error message if the item does not exist in list. There are other ways of doing this. Again, we could use a for loop to achieve something similar, and we could also use list comprehension to achieve something similar, but this method is offered as a built-in method on lists in Python, so it's quite nice and convenient to have that.